Hey guys, we are back at the building and I'm pretty excited to be here, but also being able to join you wherever you're at today. Maybe you're watching online, that's incredible. We're going to continue having online services indefinitely, and also as we reopen in stages at our campuses, at our buildings, make sure you stay up to date on all the latest things at onelifechurch.org/update, or you can hit update on the One Life app. Now that page has everything that we think you'll probably need to know about things going on. That's including reopening strategies, resources for Next Gen for kids and for students, also information like Need a Neighbor. We're still seeing people connecting and helping neighbors in need during this time, as well as resources for Luke, studying the book of Luke during our True North series that we are in right now. And also I want to highlight something that's really cool. We've been doing One Life Explorer Edition on Thursday nights at 7 p.m. at onelifechurch.org/live and our YouTube channel. That's something anyone who's exploring faith, asking some questions, we want to give you a safe space to do that. Or maybe you know someone that just enjoy that. You can share that out. That'd be really great as well. Now also, if you come into the campuses, we do have some masks that you can utilize if you want. They're not bad. They have our One Life logo on them. Pretty easy to put on. Done, if you want. Also, the things that we have been talking about locally have been incredible. We also know there's a lot going on globally, and our friends at Uncharted have put together a video just saying thank you and letting you know about some of the impact that you guys are helping make globally as well. So check this out.
Hey, One Life family, Ben
and Kathy Stewart with Uncharted International.
We just wanted to take this brief moment to say thank you for all the ways that you are supporting us and our global frontline workers during this time. Whether it's our church planters in Myanmar or Serbia or our staff in Creative Access countries, your partnership allows us to stand with these brothers and sisters in tangible, meaningful ways. It enables us to provide for their practical needs, especially in a time when food costs are skyrocketing and water, electricity, and other basic necessities have all but disappeared. But it also enables our frontline team to continue living out the hope and love of Jesus to those around them. The gospel is still being displayed and shared. People far from God are still provided opportunities to meet Him. We're still getting reports of people getting saved and human needs being met, small groups connecting, and people getting discipled in creative ways.
In the last few weeks, the primary way we viewed our current reality is through the lens of damage, destruction, and global breakdown that COVID-19 has caused. The concentration on pandemic and the rapid global spread of this disease covers headlines in every corner of the world. But there is a redemptive side to what's happening globally right now. And that's what we want to call our attention towards. God's mission is not disrupted or canceled. It's merely taking on new creative expressions of beauty, healing, and compassion. And you guys are a part of this global redemptive response. You are standing with our brothers and sisters across the world, helping them be the hands and heart of our Father, just like you are in our community. And we're praying for you, and they're praying for you.
Yeah, and so guys, together in this globally connected way, we will continue to live out God's mission of redemption during this time. So, from the Uncharted family to yours,
thank you, One Life Church.
Hey everybody, Jason McCord with One Life Church. So glad you could join us today as we continue our series, True North, a look at the life of Jesus in the Gospel of Luke. Now, Luke is the longest gospel in the New Testament, as well as one of the more detailed gospels. So I know that there's some things that you'd love to share if you've been tracking along with us in the chat. Now, if you haven't joined us through this series, I would just encourage you to go to the chat and find some of the resources that we'll be posting throughout the service. Now, also, don't feel any pressure, but maybe share where you're watching from, or possibly something that you've been able to do in the last couple weeks that you haven't been able to do in the last couple months. For me, it was a haircut. Now, I'm getting a little older, a little grayer, maybe not as many hairs to cut, but I can't tell you how grateful I was to actually lose hair. Seriously. Something else we have to offer you is our live prayer button down below. Now, if you click on that, you'll be taken to a room where someone from our prayer team or staff will join you and pray with or for you, however your need may be. Also, if you're new with us, we'd love to get to know you. There's a link that just popped over in the chat right now that you can go to, and it'll lead you to our connection card where someone can get with you later this week. But right now, we're going to go ahead and move into a time of worship through music. Now, for me, I like to just sit there and listen to the music, listen to the lyrics, and let it wash over me a little bit and just kind of pick up what it is that God's trying to say through the song. Maybe for you, you're in your pajamas and you're standing there in your living room singing along every word with your hands held high. That is awesome. I love that. God moves us so many different ways through music. So right now, together as a church, let's stand or sit and see how God is moving us.
Well, hey there, One Life. My name is Jeff, and this is my son, Avon, and we are honored to get a time to spend with you in worship this morning in this virtual experience. We're in our home right now, and it's just a privilege for us to be a part of this, and encourage you that wherever you are, probably in your own home right now, that you would just engage in this time of worship and that you would just connect with God right now. Let's do this together. Ever seen the wonder in the glimmer of first sight, as the eyes begin to open and blindness meets the light? We have so say, I see the world in light, I see the world in wonder, I see the world in life, bursting in living color. I see the world your way, and I'm walking in the light. Have you ever seen the wonder when you hear a second life, having come out of the waters with the old one left behind? If you have so say, I see the world in light, I see the world in wonder, I see the world in life, bursting in living color. I see the world your way, and I'm walking in the light. I see the world in grace, I see the world in gospel, I see the world your way, and I'm walking in the light. I'm walking in the wonder. You're the wonder in the wild, turning wilderness to wonder. If you have so say, I see the world in love, I see the world in freedom, I see Jesus' way. You're the wonder in the wild. I see the world your way, and I'm not afraid to follow. I see the world your way, and I'm not ashamed to say so. I see Jesus' way, and I'm walking in the light. I see the world in light, I see the world in wonder, I see the world in life, bursting in living color. I see the world your way, and I'm walking in the light. I see the world in grace, I and wilderness to wander. Have soul say, I see the world in love, I see the world in freedom, I see Jesus' way. You're the wonder in the wild. We're going to do another song with you, and this song's called Build My Life. And I don't know about you right now, but I know that this season that we've been in through the stay-at-home and the social distancing and all the stuff that we've been having to do, I know that it's been really revealing in a lot of ways for me. And in some ways, very positive, in other ways, very, we'll say, constructive. But as I think about this song, and I think about the message of it, and I think about what it says about building my life upon your love, it is a firm foundation, putting my trust in you alone, just those messages that in all of it, no matter what we're facing, no matter the ups, the downs, the things that we're going through, the ways that we're being tested and pulled and stretched and molded right now, that we can rely on Him for our joy, for our contentment, for our guidance, our everything. And so He is that firm foundation. And so as we go into this song and as we maybe just reflect on those things, and especially in this time right now, I just want to encourage you to think about that, to think about where have you been molded, where have you been stretched, where have you been pulled, and where is your foundation maybe been, I don't know, shifted a little bit or pulled in a different direction, that maybe we need to kind of reestablish what that firm foundation really looks like. Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes and wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, Jesus, the name above every other name. And Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Oh, holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes and wonder and show me who you are and fill me in you alone, and I will not be shaken. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around. And I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken.
So now we're going to hear from one of our elders, Mark Weaver, about the joy of generosity.
Hello, One Lifers and visitors. I'm going to continue with generosity. Today I'm going to read from 2 Corinthians chapter 8, and this is Paul writing to the Corinthian churches to encourage them about what was going on in the Macedonian church. And now, brothers and sisters, we want you to know about the grace that God has given the Macedonian churches. In the midst of a very severe trial, their overflowing joy and their extreme poverty welled up in rich generosity. So that's not our way. That's not how we normally think in the world. You don't think that you're going to take joy and mix it with poverty and end up with generosity. But when it's fueled by God's grace, it can. For I testify that they gave as much as they were able and even beyond their ability. Entirely on their own, they urgently plead with us for the privilege of sharing in the service to the Lord's people, and they exceeded our expectations. They gave themselves first of all to the Lord, and then by the will of God also to us. So we urge Titus, just as he had earlier made a beginning, to bring also to completion this act of grace on your part, speaking Corinthians. But since you excel in everything, in faith and speech and knowledge and complete earnestness, and in the love we've kindled in you, see that you also excel in this grace of giving. We belong to a different kingdom as followers of Christ. And because of that, it's a kingdom of love, and he supplies grace, and that is actually the energy to do the things that we otherwise couldn't, like mixing poverty and joy, ending up with rich generosity. But we live in his kingdom, and he supplies all we need for that. Anything it takes for giving that produces the generosity that he's calling to, is possible in him. So I want to go ahead and pray for us. Lord, I ask that in this coming week that you expose your grace to us. Not only your mercy and the forgiving of us and bringing us into your kingdom, but the grace that sustains us. So please reveal yourself, the fullness of your grace, and lead us into the generosity of your heart that you're calling us to. Amen. There's ways to give at the bottom of your screen. Again, thank you, and pray about God's grace in giving for you this week.
As we get headed into our message, I want to take this time to give all the kids in the room an opportunity to take advantage of the resources our Next Gen team has offered to them on the webpage or on the app. Now, parents, this message, we just want to give you a little heads up that some of the content in there is a little sensitive for younger ears. So here's Brett.
Well, if you can believe it, it is Memorial Day weekend. And I say it that way because I can't believe it. I feel like ever since the pandemic started, I've been in a time warp, but it is here. And what the good thing about it is what it stands for and what it's honoring can help us with the passage that we're going to be looking at today. I think I said a few weeks ago that my son is right now, as we speak, is in Army basic training. And I think it's fantastic. I'm 1,000% behind it. But if I'm being really honest, I remember every now and then that there's been tens of thousands upon tens of thousands of families throughout our country's history that have received their sons and daughters back in flag-draped coffins. And that thought kind of haunts me, but it also reminds me, and that's what this weekend is all about, is to honor and remember that the default mode of politics, the default mode of political power is tyranny. Throughout history, that's true. And it's true around the world right now. And we live in a world that requires power in order to preserve freedom. And it just so happens that our country is the world's superpower right now. And because we have a thing like the Bill of Rights that says I can say things like this and we have freedoms, then freedom exists a whole lot more. But that came at the cost of sons and daughters being lost. And that's something that we need to pause a bit and honor during this weekend. Now, I want you to think about that and then take yourself back to the time of Jesus. The world into which he was born, they were struggling with this very thing, and that they were under tyranny. The Roman world ruled over the world, and they oppressed people. If you were in Israel, you lived under the thumb of the Roman government. They had come in, they had conquered, and they were in charge. You didn't have freedom. You didn't have a Bill of Rights. You didn't have any of that kind of stuff. You had oppression, and you experienced it. So therefore, the national conversation among the Jewish people was, when's the Messiah coming? When's the Messiah coming? And one of the things that we pointed out in our study of Luke that we're doing is that Luke likes to share that there is a story that God is telling. And the first part of the story, the Old Testament, anticipates and looks forward to and predicts that there will be a Messiah coming. And that Messiah is going to bring peace. He's going to bring justice. He is going to get rid of the oppressors. And so there's a lot of talk about where is the Messiah? Who is the Messiah? Where one of their candidates that they thought surely he must be the Messiah was John the Baptist. Now, we looked at his life a little bit last week. We're going to look at it again, the next passage that we're going to go into. And John the Baptist was someone who was very, very popular for a lot of reasons. And I pointed out last time, I quoted a Jewish historian outside of the Bible, and I want to quote him again because I want us to be reminded that the Bible is recording history, not just fables. It's not just once upon a time kind of stuff. Listen to what Flavius Josephus says. He's a Jewish historian. Now, many people came in crowds to him. He's talking about John the Baptist, for they were greatly moved by his words. Herod, who feared the great influence John had over the masses, might put them into his power and enable him to raise a rebellion, for they seemed ready to do anything he should advise, thought it best to put him to death. Now that just affirms what the Bible's about to tell us about who John the Baptist was. He was someone everyone was listening to and someone everybody was speculating about. Maybe he will get rid of the oppression. So that's where it picks up in Luke chapter 3, beginning at verse 15 and following. Listen to what the Bible has to say. The people were waiting expectantly and were all wondering in their hearts if John might possibly be the Messiah. John answered them all, I baptize you with water, but one who is more powerful than I will come, the straps of whose sandals I am not worthy to untie. He will baptize you with the Holy Spirit and fire. His winnowing fork is in his hand to clear his threshing floor and to gather the wheat into his barn. But he will burn up the chaff with unquenchable fire. And with many other words, that's Luke saying, he summarized John. John exhorted the people and proclaimed the good news to them. But when John rebuked Herod the Tetrarch because of his marriage to Herodias, his brother's wife, and all the other evil things he had done, Herod added this to them all. He locked John up in prison. Now again, John was immensely popular, but it's worth pointing out again because you kind of wonder why. Because when you read what he said, and we looked at this last week it recorded that the opening to one of his sermons, he looks at the crowd and he says, you brood of vipers. He calls them a brood of vipers. And here he's talking about unquenchable fire and stuff like that. So going to a John the Baptist conference was not going to this success in life thing. This was not a pep talk. He hit hard. But still, multitudes gathered around him, and Josephus said they were ready to do whatever he said. And I think the reason is because people love authenticity. People can spot the real deal most often when they see it. John had what I would call moral force. You've heard people like that who, whenever they go after, whether it's racism or some kind of moral issue in our world, they come across a lot more powerful and forceful than other people do because you can tell their life matches their message. And I think people could sense that in John. Have you ever been corrected by someone that you respect a whole lot and felt the weight of that? Back when I was a teenager, a friend of mine and I, we hitchhiked out of town. It was kind of a dumb thing. We didn't tell anybody where we were going. We just left. No one knew where we were. And so people were worried about us. It was a big deal. And my Grandma Nikki, had never rebuked me for anything, had never raised her voice to me at all. I was on the phone when all that was over, and she lit into me. And I'm talking about it when I'm in my 50s. I still remember it. Why? Because Grandma Nikki had moral force. That's why. Because it was someone I respected. I knew she was the real deal. And to be on the outs with her and to have her correct me, that was something. Now, here's the other thing. You notice that the passage closed with this whole thing of John the Baptist rebuking Herod. Now, Herod, he was a puppet ruler underneath the Roman government. And he was just given power. And back in those days, if you rebuked somebody like that, you took your own life in your hands. But now here's what's going on. Here's what's interesting about this. It says that John the Baptist rebuked Herod because of his marriage to Herodias. Now to understand this, you need to understand that Herod, first of all, he was already married, and he had left his wife for this other woman. She had left her husband for this other man. But not only that, I'll let a commentator describe this. Quote, the relationship between Herod and Herodias was both complicated and sinful. He was her uncle, and he seduced her from his half-brother. In marrying Herodias, Herod at once married a woman that was both his niece and his sister-in-law. I mean, and I'm not going to chart that out for you in some family tree or something. And that was just wacky stuff. It wasn't only an adulterous affair, it was an incestuous affair. And so John the Baptist is pointing that out in public and probably added, and by the way, that's disgusting. What in the world are you doing? And he called him out, Luke says, for all the other evils he had done. Now, you and I, we can, because of the freedoms in our country, we can go home today and on Facebook, we can trash talk the president, senators, congressmen, governors, whoever we want, no fear. But back then, everybody knew the king had all the power. And if he didn't like what you were saying, he could do exactly what he did to John. And he did. But imagine you're watching that and you know that. You're thinking, John is someone with genuine, true, deep down moral force. And you admired it. And so that's why people are thinking, this guy has to be the Messiah. I mean, this is the kind of person that we want. I mean, he makes me feel guilty all the time, but he's the kind of person that you want with just absolute integrity leading the way. But then John answers the question. And in the answering to the question, I want to give you one of the key points that I want you to take away. And it's this. If you want to fix your eyes on Jesus, which is our goal during our study of the Gospel of Luke, know who you are and who you aren't. Know who you are and who you aren't. John knew who he was and he knew who he wasn't because he answers the question. Now, if rabbis back in those days, he kind of brings up this whole image. Rabbis back in those days were fairly common. He was a rabbi and he had disciples. Jesus was a rabbi and he had disciples. It was a fairly commonly known thing. But John says, hey, I'm baptizing you, but one is coming whose sandals I'm not worthy to untie. Well, here's what's interesting about that. Rabbis back then were known, and there was kind of a rabbi playbook that was known around the culture, that if you followed and you were a disciple, you had two jobs. Number one, it was to memorize what the rabbi said. And number two, it was to mimic the actions that he took. But the rabbi was absolutely in charge. My son wrote us a letter from his army, and he was talking about being under drill sergeants. And I don't think it was like yelling and screaming was going on for the rabbis, but it was kind of like this. His life is under the authority of drill sergeants right now. He said, for instance, one morning his whole company got woke up at 3:30 in the morning, and the drill sergeant said, stand right there next to your bunk until we tell you not to. They came back 3 hours later. It was that kind of authority that the rabbis had over disciples. Now, in a playbook that's actually quoted by a commentator, I want you to hear something that'll kind of bring out what John was saying. It says, every service which a slave performs for his master shall a disciple do for his teacher. In other words, rabbi can ask you to do anything except for the loosening of his sandal strap. Untying the sandal strap was just too much, the commentator goes on to say. But John selects precisely this duty, which the rabbis regarded as too menial for a disciple, as that for which he was unworthy. This is genuine humility. It was an image that was known in their culture, and he says, listen, you think I have moral force? I know you think I'm the Messiah, but listen, when the Messiah really comes, you ain't seen nothing yet. I'm not even worthy to do the most menial task that you've already laid out as a menial task for him. I'm not worthy of him. And he points his way towards Jesus. You see, he knew who he was, and he knew who he wasn't. Do you remember the beginning of this year? Neither do I. I think it was about 8 years ago or so. We did a series that was all designed to talk about our purpose in life and our mission in life and finding your purpose and all those sorts of things. And I gave you a quote that stands here that describes everybody's purpose. We said, your purpose is to glorify Jesus by your words and deeds and to share his words and deeds with others. That's what all of our purpose is. And John the Baptist knew that, and he had that. And think about it. The purity of who this guy was. He had the crowds following him. He could have just said, yeah, by the way, I am the Messiah, follow me. And he knew he would have had them. But he knew he was on this earth to do one thing, and that was to glorify Jesus by his words and deeds and to share his words and his deeds with others and to point people to him. He knew he wasn't the Messiah. And guess what? Neither are you, and neither am I. And the beauty of that is, it's freeing. The Messiah's job is to come and solve life's problems. He can use us, he can equip us, we can be his agents, but ultimately we're not designed to be the Messiah. Jesus is the Messiah, and our job is simply to point to him. Know who you are and know who you are not. But then John gives a picture of who Jesus is. He says, first of all, you haven't seen nothing yet. And then he gives a portrayal of who Jesus is. I think it's really, really important because the goal of this series is to fix our eyes on Jesus and to fix our eyes on the actual Jesus, not the Jesus of our emotions or our imaginations, but the Jesus who's really there, who's revealed in the Gospels. And John the Baptist would have known things about Jesus that other people just didn't get. And so he goes on to describe him. Now, first he starts by saying, I'm baptizing. And we said last week, and I want to remind you of this, that John did kind of a revolutionary thing by baptizing Jewish people. You see, to Jewish people, baptizing was done for Gentile people. In other words, if you were a Gentile person, you were a non-Jew, and you wanted to become a Jew, you would be baptized. Because the word baptized, it means to literally dip down into. If you were a Jew, you were used to ceremonial washings. You wash your hands, you wash your feet, you did things like that. But a full immersion down in the water thing was done for those who wanted to become Jews. And so it was radical for John the Baptist to come and say, no, you as a Jewish person, you need to be baptized. And it stands for two things. It was viewed as a cleansing off, a purifying, a washing. That old Gentile life, if you were a Gentile, is now washed away, and a transformation. So John uses that image, and he says, when the Messiah comes, he's going to baptize you in the Holy Spirit and fire. What's he talking about there? Immerse you down into the Holy Spirit and truly transform you inside and out. But also, fire stands for purifying. Purify you on a level that I never could. That was the image that he gives of who Jesus is and what he comes to do. The other thing is, then he gives this kind of cryptic illustration. And it was this whole thing of his winnowing fork, he says, is in his hand to clear his threshing floor and to gather the wheat into his barn. But he will burn up the chaff with unquenchable fire. Now again, John is not a pep talk guy. I mean, that's kind of a spooky image, but it's an image that I love. And one of the reasons is because the people in his audience would have been from a very agrarian society. They lived in villages, and almost certainly every one of them would have seen this being done or would have done it themselves. And the reason that he and Jesus used imagery like this is so once people go home after hearing John speak, every single time they see this winnowing fork deal happen, they're reminded of the message. It keeps on preaching. Well, what's going on here? So what it is basically there's a threshing floor, and oxen would tread. They would walk on the grain, and they would break up the grain, and it would separate into wheat and chaff. And then on a breezy day, you would take a winnowing fork and you would throw that material up into the air, and the breeze would blow away the chaff and all the useless things, and then the wheat would drop on the floor. And it says you would gather that up in your barn. That's what you're going to keep. You can make wheat thins out of it. You can do things like that. And then the chaff was raked up and used as fuel for fire. And so John is saying about the Messiah, about the Jesus that we're supposed to fix our eyes on, is that he's coming to separate. He's coming to judge. He's coming to bring justice. Now, on one hand, that's really, really good news. But on the other hand, it's kind of bad news. So I want you to remember to, know who you are and know who you're not. But also here's another one I want you to remember from John the Baptist's life about Jesus. To appreciate the good news, you have to understand the bad news. To appreciate the good news, you have to understand the bad news. You see, if you're a Jewish person, you're waiting on the Messiah and you're waiting for him to lift off the oppression, what you're looking for is someone who does bring justice. Those Romans, they're oppressing us. They do all kinds of things that are wiping away our dignity and hurting us, and he's going to make that right. But the problem is that he's talking to Jewish people. And in the same way he baptized them, he's talking to them. And he seems to be saying this Messiah is not just coming for the Romans, he's coming for you, and he's going to judge. He's going to separate. Now, I had to go to college for it. I've taught the Bible most of my adult life. I've read it devotionally many times. So I have a reasonable familiarity with what the Bible sounds like and what's in there. And I can say without fear of exaggeration that on nearly every page in the Bible, the concepts of righteousness and unrighteousness, good versus evil, is present. It's just there. It's part of the fabric of how God is presented, of how people are assessed. It's part of everything that goes on, is that God is not only loving, but he's also holy, and he's also a judge, and he hates wickedness, and he loves righteousness. And that's what he expects from his people. So as Messiah is bringing this, it's very important to remember, because to appreciate the good news, you have to understand the bad news. See, it's very interesting that Luke actually says that John was preaching the good news to the people. You're thinking, good news? He was talking about unquenchable fire and all this kind of thing. What's good about that? It's reminding us, first of all, that God is the judge, and he's not going to let evil rule. Listen to what one commentator says about that. He says, quote, "Judgment is not at first sight very good news, but it is an integral part of the gospel. Unless we can be sure that in the end, evil will be decisively overthrown, there is no ultimate good news." The reason the Jewish people wanted the Messiah to come was he would take care of evil. And that's something we all desire. The problem is, though, that the evil is not just outside where the Romans are. The evil is not just outside where others are. Evil runs through all of our hearts. We all want justice done. And part of the good news, it can't be separated from the bad news that evil is going to be dealt with, even in a heavy way. There's a very popular pornographic site that airs the exploitation of children. And there's a woman who's fighting it. Like just this past week, they said that there was a 9-year-old who was raped, and it was filmed and it was broadcast all over the world. And people are watching this stuff, and when we hear things like that, it makes your blood boil, doesn't it? It should. We should want evil to be overcome. But again, the problem is that it's not just for those who are out there, not just for those who are doing that sort of thing, but it's for all of us, because we have something deeper than just a mere moral problem going on. So several years ago, I was a delivery truck driver, and I had favorite radio shows, and I remember going to one of them, and I caught it about halfway in, and I heard this voice that I'd never heard before, and it was kind of heavy accented voice, but within a minute, this person had just pulled me in. And after several minutes, I was thinking, this is one of the greatest messages I've ever heard in my life. So I dug around, I found out who it was. It was a man by the name of Ravi Zacharias. And he has since become a hero of mine. He passed away this past week, and he was someone that went all over the world and preached the gospel. Especially at university campuses, I got to hear him at Indiana University, and he followed it with Q&A, and he was intelligent, and he was gracious. It was just a beautiful thing to behold. But listen to what he says about what the Christian faith is all about when it comes to judgment, morals, and everything else. Quote, "The Christian faith, simply stated, reminds us that our fundamental problem is not moral. Rather, our fundamental problem is spiritual. It is not just that we are immoral, but that a moral life alone cannot bridge what separates us from God. Herein lies the cardinal difference between the moralizing religions and Jesus' offer to us. Jesus does not offer to make bad people good, but to make dead people alive." The Messiah came for the moral flaws, but he came for the morally flawed. All of us that have that deeper spiritual problem that results in the evil that we do. And the only way that we can, when the separation happens that Jesus is going to bring and that we really secretly want because we want justice, the only way to be on the side where we can receive grace and be fruitful and good and holy is to receive what he does for us on our behalf. That's humbling. But it also ought to lead us to know this is who I am. I'm not the Messiah. I don't have to be. I can be joyful. And if I can fully appreciate the good news, I need to understand the bad news. I can have that if I've been in this for a long time. And I hope you'll take that away. And it'll add some joy to your step if you're a believer. if you don't believe this stuff yet, I want to ask you to really think about that. To think about, what if true justice really did come? And you want it to be against things like this awful stories that have been broadcast around the world of children being exploited. You want it for that. But what if justice came to you? Could you stand before a holy God? Well, he warns you in advance you can't. But Jesus came to give you the ability to do it. And with that in mind, I want us to pray together and just pray through some of these things. Father, in Jesus' name, I pray that you will please help us who already believe to have the joy and the beauty of what you brought. You brought your hatred for evil in our own hearts, but you brought it in the form of someone who gives us forgiveness and life and beauty. And so it's humbling, but it also gives us courage. So now give us moral force as we go forward in our lives. But Lord, I also pray for those who don't know you, that today will be their day, that they will just say, listen, I realize that if justice really came, that I would not be able to stand. And so I want to receive what Jesus did on the cross for me as the Messiah, so that I can be useful and good and holy and right before him. I ask that you'll do that in people's lives. And I thank you for sending John the Baptist with moral force, but also for him knowing who he really was to point to you. And I pray that we'll all just rest in that truth. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Well, we're going to continue studying Luke, and we're hoping that you'll stay engaged in all the reading resources that we have available to you on our webpage and the app. Also, you can go to our update page, and that's where you can find any information on the reopening strategies that we have for our physical campuses. But right now, if you'd like to take advantage of the virtual lobby link that we have in the chat for you, you can go there and maybe see some people you haven't in a while, or maybe have some questions about One Life in general. We'd love to see you there. See you guys next week.